Next Benedict death roll is suicide. Yeah, I saw this. I guess this is what the police were alluding at, you know? Like you had a trans teen die right after suffering some kind of head injury and being in the hospital for it, but then the death isn't from the head injury. Apparently, the autopsy found a mix of drugs, Benadryl and something else. Classic suicide concoction, whatever else. I mean, this obviously doesn't change anything. So a trans teen killed themselves after being bullied and sent to the hospital by bullies, rather than just the head injury itself killing the trans teen. Like it seems like the underlying logic of opposition here remains literally identical. Why was it reported as them being beaten to death? It wasn't that they were beaten to death. It was that there were three girls who beat the shit out of Nex in a bathroom, and that Nex had suffered injuries, was in the hospital, and then next day passed away. So the assumption then was like head injuries, which is a pretty common occurrence if you're being, knocked about. You can die pretty suddenly from getting hit in the head. Won't right-wingers use this as a wedge to say it's mental illness and not bullying? I wonder if there's any relationship between being bullied and mental health. Also, keep in mind, conservatives were defending Nex being killed while assuming that Nex had died to injuries, Conservatives don't give a shit. It's not like conservatives actually give a fuck about the mental health of trans teens. Like, their defense of the situation extended to the assumption that they were just beaten to death, It's not like this changes anything from their perspective. Like, what's the logic, This transgender teenager who was sent to the hospital after being beaten by three girls, turns out they didn't die from head injuries. They died from suicide. Don't you feel stupid now, lefty trans activists? What point is being made? What argument is being made? I don't understand. Yeah, left wing owned, I guess. Left wing destroyed? Yeah. I genuinely don't think it's suicide. Well, coroners have lied and autopsy reports have been inaccurate before, but I don't really have any reason to assume that, right? Like, it could be the case, but I mean, I don't really have any grounds on which to make that claim. And again, what's even the point, right? Like, it doesn't, like, the underlying point is that shit does indeed suck. Like, wasn't Nex's teacher ousted after being targeted by libs of TikTok several years ago? Like, Nex had a pro-trans teacher who and now libs of TikTok is the presiding on the council of Scholastic something. Same district, different school. Was it a different one? Okay, yeah. Whatever the case may be, the relationship here, ultimately, it's not about the physical trauma of a specific incident of bullying. That's not, the point here wasn't on the velocity of a fist or how sharp the edge of a bath countertop is. That wasn't the point. The point was about the poor treatment of trans youth, something that doesn't change at all from the previous version of the story to this one. It's exactly the same. But that means Nex was suicidal and the hospital didn't notice and let them go. The hospital isn't magic, not psychic. Girl with a guitar. The problem is you can relate it to the George Floyd overdose thing, but you can't question what the coroner's office does or says. I don't like engaging in baseless conspiracy unless there's some kind of underlying logic to appeal to, or unless there's a way to double check it. For example, if the coroner's office that overlooked Nex's death had a very long history of biased or conservative punditry or ideologically motivated behavior, then you could point to that. But the fact that coroners can lie isn't really a good baseline. And again, it's why die on that hill? It's fairly difficult to commit suicide. Nex didn't commit suicide in the hospital. It was drugs taken afterwards. 2 drugs in their system. Okay, which drugs? Diphenhydramine and fluoxetine, an antihistamine and an antidepressant. Yeah. Aren't coroners shockingly unregulated and corrupt? I mean, yeah, probably. Bosch, the coroner's office, does have a long history of being inaccurate and dishonest. They lost it in 2019, in 2009, and didn't get it back since. What do you mean? Okay. The Oklahoma State Medical Examiner's Office has... let me put it this way. I'm actively getting annoyed at people who are deferring to conspiracy. Why open up an indefensible front of, hey, I think that this... hey, I think that this coroner's result is inaccurate. I have no evidence to prove it, but I'm just going to assume that it is, when it doesn't even matter. Like, all you're doing is opening yourself up to another front. If it turns out later that a second autopsy is done and they lied about the content of the drugs, then wait for that slam dunk later, because wait for that satisfaction, okay? Deferred gratification. That'll be satisfying for you, okay? That'll be, if that happens, you can go like, well, shit, and you can come to Twitter and bring all your arguments. But in lieu of that, like, why, why like open yourself up to, really easy attack? Also, even if everything is on the up and up, concussions increase the risk of suicide attempts. That is true, yeah. Concussions mess your brain right up. I'm confused by you saying it's nothing. Oh, that's hard out here. I think that being beaten near to death by your peers in a school that is not supportive of your identity could also be a factor. I wonder if that would have any kind of impact in your mental health, I remember the day after r/conservative was saying Nex instigated the fight, so they deserve to be beaten up. Yeah, literally, yeah. Like, from conservatives' end of thing, nothing really changes because they thought Nex deserved to die anyway. They were gloating about it. When it turns out the fight was instigated by Nex spilling water on the 3 girls who then beat them up, they were like, see? Well, spilling water on someone means you deserve to be beaten to death. Like, the conservative line on this is not going to be meaningfully changed. I just don't know how the police and school district have lied about everything so far, but somehow we believe it. Girl with a guitar, you're talking like any conspiracist. You're not, nothing, never mind. Go to Twitter if you want. It's fine, it's fine. It's fine. It's not here. Just do it elsewhere. There is body cam. I don't think that high school girls typically wear body cams when they go into the restroom. I feel like that would probably be a bad thing to encourage for a variety of reasons. That sounds like that's a very Japanese idea right there, but we're not doing that. There's probably security cam stuff with them going in and out of the bathroom. Maybe? I don't know. I still think the hospital shares some blame for not catching a suicidal concussive patient. You can't... Suicidality isn't... Nex was in the hospital following injury sustained. There's no magical procedure the hospital can use to determine from Nex's brain that they're suicidal. Like, suicidality isn't something that you determine just like off a cuff visit to the hospital. Like, you get a psych eval or you've demonstrated pre-existing tendencies to suicidality. I mean, and do you think like anybody who might be at risk for suicidality should be deterred in the hospital indefinitely without like the hospital wards them or something? It's not really like a solvable... Anyway, the reason why I'm being insistent on this is because I think it's very important for people to focus on the right elements of this conversation. It bothers me sometimes when people focus on the wrong ones, It's just a you always want to have like the best the best like foot forward in any given argument. You want to like lead with the strongest one. If you have sort of like supplemental arguments, you can kind of proportion them to the strength of the argument, but it's just very basic rhetorical construction. For a good example of this, one of my least favorite parts of the Black Lives Matter protests was the fact that oftentimes the conversation was singled down to the murder of black people, of unarmed black men, from the police, which is, don't get me wrong, a serious issue. But if you look at the broader data, there's actually a lot of like really muddled and inconsistent data when it comes to like people's standards for what is or is not considered to be like an unarmed person, or whether or not they're demonstrating aggressive behavior. And also, those racial statistics pan out a lot more evenly than a lot of people think. But if you step back and look at things broadly in terms of like overall police interactions, or in terms of police brutality, or police standards of escalating brutality or conflict, then it's like, whoa, holy shit, America's kind of racist. Whoa, American policing kind of racist, actually. Whoa, but by hyper fixating on one like tiny subset of a broader conversation, it opened up a lot of conservatives to say like, well, did you even know what the purport? Do you know how many white people are killed by cops every year? And it's like it's always good to know, I guess, the broader scope of the conversation, so you know how to lead with the most defensible position. That's the hope. No, girl with a guitar, it's okay. Look, I think that it's natural to be very distrustful of power, especially like the police, coroner's offices, stuff like that. And in my mind, like, okay, to be clear, internally, in my head, right up here, okay, when it comes to anything related to power or the cops especially, my mind is, this is why I love being a concluder, okay? Anything that happens anytime in my head, you know, even the most obvious shit in the world, you know? I see a police officer crossing the street, and I'm thinking like, well, the only reason he's doing that is because he glanced to his side and he thought he saw a black person walking down the same side of the street, so he's crossing it because he's racist. But like, obviously that's because, you know, being a naturally demonic force, cops attract that kind of ire. When you're actually like processing and presenting arguments, you know, it's just, even just from a rhetorical perspective, like leaving aside the broader obligation we have to be careful with, you know, anything being truthful or what we care to say, it's just rhetorically effective to at least start from that position, you know? With the George Floyd thing, people did get vindicated, right? Because the initial coroner report did say it was the fentanyl that killed him, and then it's like, what if actually having somebody pressed in the back of your neck for 7 minutes, what if that did something too, you know? And then you had the follow-up report that was privately conducted that challenged the initial report. And I mean, at that point, you can ask yourself some questions like, hey, is it possible that the coroner's office might have been like fudging a little bit in order to protect their own? After all, autopsies are not exactly well, they are a science, but the conclusions you come to in an autopsy aren't like an objective, easy, like, oh, you know, like a doctor goes through a body and they're like, okay, well, you know, there's trauma here, there's like a lack of blood here, you know, the fact that there's more blood here than here indicates this happened before this thing happened. And, you know, sometimes conclusions can vary. You can also overstate the impact to an extent, right? Like, maybe Floyd wouldn't have died if he wasn't on fentanyl, right? But also, he wouldn't have died if the knee hadn't been on the back of his neck for 7 minutes, you know? Like, maybe it's like a 90-10 thing, where you need to reach 100 to kill George Floyd, and 90 of that came from the knee, and 10 of it came from the fentanyl, and then it's like, well, you could, I guess, correctly say, well, the fentanyl was what killed him, or you could say, well, it was the cop, actually, right? For the most part, we tend to assume in situations like that the person at fault is the one initiating the aggression, because, like, if you punch an old person and they die, the coroner could go, well, the death was caused by, you know, age, because if they were young, that punch wouldn't have killed them. But that's obviously not what would get reported, right? They would say it was the punch. So you get what I mean. Yeah, exactly. It's the assist versus the kill credit thing. The health bar argument, yes. Being a coroner is just being able to visualize a person's health bar decreasing as they were subject to the conditions that killed them. You know, you press your fingers to your temple and you envision just the line like moving when stuff happens. Coroner, like present at the scene of a crime to see somebody limping away from a car accident and pogging as they see that person has 1 HP left. Like, bro, you have no idea, dude. You have no idea how close you came. Yo!